With international telemedicine, there's been a huge uptake in telemedicine generally since the pandemic. And as is often the case, the law is catching up and lagging behind patient demand. So what's telemedicine anyway? I carried out quite extensive and painstaking research on this very question for you today. So with that in mind, here is the Wikipedia definition of telemedicine. It's health-related services and information via electronic information and information and telecommunication technologies. So I'm making a little bit of a joke about using Wikipedia to get a definition, but frankly, there are so many different definitions and ideas about what this means that Wiki's really as good as any. So the question arises as to whether an email or a telephone call could be telemedicine. Normal definitions in a vast array of countries can cover even audio-only communication, such as telephone calls. We've seen a lot of regulation and a lot of new law in allowing telemedicine at a national level in response to the unique demands placed on the healthcare system as a result of the pandemic. But most countries still don't have any regulation about telemedicine, so those services are governed usually inadequately under existing laws, governing the traditional kind of face-to-face doctor-patient consultations. I'd like to talk to you just quickly about international telemedicine. And what I mean by international telemedicine is where the medical professional is not living in the same country as the patient. So let's imagine we have a US citizen from Chicago living and working in China. Can his US cardiologist consult with this patient in China via video call, maybe even sharing live ECG results? The first question that arises is, what do we mean by practicing medicine? This isn't well defined, although there is quite an Chinese law in relation to this, just about. So how about we change the back path, have a Chinese doctor sitting in the consultation, US cardiologist, and then how about we take the patient out of the picture and have the Chinese doctor deal direct with the US doctor and discuss the treatment plan? I think the risk diminishes as we go down through these scenarios. What about a second medical opinion, like a referral of medical notes from the Chinese to a US medical facility? Many Chinese hospitals are actively seeking joint ventures with US medical facilities for this type of service, extending into more fully participating in direct-to-patient consultations. The question also arises as whether the US doctor would require to be licensed with the Chinese authorities. So around the world, it's a patient's location is typically determinative of the licensing and registration regime for direct physician-patient encounters. Similar to the US, where physicians should generally be licensed in the state where the patient is receiving the services. Most non-US jurisdictions would require a physician to be locally licensed if providing consultations with patients in that territory. So it's a tricky area. Would Chinese data privacy laws apply? Probably. Some countries don't allow medical data to leave the country, so that's another issue for consideration. Would the US doctor's medical malpractice insurance cover them? Probably not. Something to think about and may encourage doctors to be reluctant to provide extraterritorial advice and consultations. Another issue that's really live for expatriates is who will write the prescription for drugs when they can't be bought over the counter. Chinese pharmacy is not going to accept a script from a doctor in Chicago, no matter how good he is. So there are many open questions which are more difficult to answer and just some things to think about whenever we are considering the application of international